Michael, in this segment we're going to be talking about two sort of polar opposites, convergent and divergent. So let's start with how are you using those?
Well, I'd like to structure it in terms of this concept that Antonio Damasio came up with.
One of the pioneers on trying to figure out how the brain works.
Yeah, did a lot of work on emotions. And so, but he had this idea that he presented in a paper, I forget exactly when it was, 2011 or something like that.
A recent paper.
Yeah, it was relatively recent.
Yeah, he has written books. He's somebody who we all watch for the next idea that comes from him.
Right, right. It's called the convergence-divergence zones. And what's important about this, I think, is that conceptually it makes sense in terms of a lot of different things. But he's actually saying this is the way the brain structures ideas. So it translates into the actual structure of the brain.
And when we say structure, we repeat over and over in these segments, we're talking about the physical architecture. Right. And until the last decade or two, you couldn't really prove that because you couldn't see into your brain. Now that we've got the imaging machines that can do that, his ideas are being confirmed in some of his thinking. So when you say the structure, that's the actual physical structure of the brain.
Yeah, and I should put a caveat on that. I'm going to talk about sort of a pyramidic structure. There isn't really a pyramid structure in the brain, but the relationships, that implies are the way that the... so there is this sort of pyramid architecture that he talks about. And what happens when the brain is processing sensory information from the outside world, for example? What you're actually processing are not pictures. You're not taking in a whole picture of what's happening in there. You're taking in little visual elements or little auditory elements. Your eyes are picking up horizontals and verticals and diagonals and shadows and colors.
All simultaneously.
Yeah, it's all coming in and it hits the retina and it's processed and then it goes,
Okay, at that point I always say that the eyes are simply cameras. They don't have neurons in the eyes, but they send data. Ears don't have, ears are microphones.
Right.
So when the data comes in, where does it go through this process of convergent and divergent?
Well, once it starts getting up into the brain, then the brain is got to process all of these little individual elements and put them together in a way that, we actually can recognize this as, oh, that's a lamb.
It's a jigsaw puzzle that's thrown at you and it has to filter out, how am I going to use all this?
Yeah, and it does it in kind of this hierarchical, remember the game 20 Questions?
Yeah.
You're driving in the car and you say...
Try to narrow it down.
Yeah, you narrow it down. Well, it's, so you've got all of this data and essentially the brain is saying, all right, this is beginning to look like an object. I see that there's an object because I see an edge and I have, field and...
Would these be tiny little ahas? Now you get it.
It could be.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think mostly we're not processing this on a conscious level.
Okay.
Yeah. But each time you go up a little further, it's an object. Oh, it's an object that's moving. It's an object that is moving that has eyes. It looks like it's probably an animal. It's got fur. Each time you go up, you get closer and closer to the actual concept, of what it is. So one of the things that I talk about is that this low-level stuff, those are pure sensations, color, line, so on. As you get up this pyramid and you're sort of doing this convergence, you're getting up towards perceptions or percepts, they call that, where you actually have an idea of what it is that you're looking at. So that's the convergence zone.
Okay.
And Damasio's point is that there are all kinds of convergence, divergence zones that are going on in the brain. You might have
all simultaneously?
Yeah. If we're experiencing the outside world, we're getting visual data and there's sort of a convergence zone that's putting the visual data together. There's another convergence zone that's putting the auditory information together. At some point, those come together and either say, the brain says they make sense together.
They affect each other. Okay, you
Right.
got two of the senses. Throw in the sense of smell. Then you've got all of a sudden something that looks like something if all of a sudden there is another stimulation, whether it's sight, sound, touch, then that's an ongoing dynamic that this convergence is going to be changed by the moment.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So if your brain is coming together and saying, "Oh, that looks like a lamb," but the audio stuff is saying, "Roar," it's roaring like a lion. Say, wait a minute.
Or if you think that it's a raccoon and you want to get a close look at the raccoon and then you see it has a white stripe on its back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. So the idea is it's all converging. The brain can also work in the other direction, although largely
And
it's
that's
coming
divergent?
divergent.
Okay.
Yeah. Now when you're dealing with creativity, they talk about a lot about divergent thinking, because that's this process where you sort of are trying to break things apart. You're breaking the routines that you have, the routine thinking, and trying to break them apart so that you can think out of the box, if you will. So you're breaking it apart, you're diverging. A point, again, of our creative cycle, going through this whole process, is that you need to do both of these. Remember the saturation phase?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. But so you're doing all these simultaneously?
Maybe simultaneously, or if it's something that's happening really quickly, or sequential if you're
Okay.
actually being more deliberate about it.
Okay.
Because if you're doing a whole creative project, you probably want to gather as much information as you can first, do this convergence before you start breaking things apart, because you need to have something to break apart.
Okay. One of the things I know in the chapters of the books that I've been trying to keep up, because you are ahead of me on this one and I'm learning as we go, when you have that divergent, convergent, it's important for our students to really understand how that works. So we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back with a second portion, because this is kind of the heavy lifting part, and some of the things that are really difficult to understand, you need to take a break. So is that okay?
Yeah.
We'll be back in a moment.
Thank you.
All right.